Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start the panel.
Okay. Hello, and thank you for attending our first Voices of the Outstanding 50 Asian Americans in Business panel discussion. This event is hosted by the Asian American Business Development Center. And I want to give a special recognition and thank you to Jing Lee and Scott Wang, program managers at the AABDC, as well as to Yoon Sun Kang and Francis Lugo here at Pfizer for helping to coordinate and pull this event together today. Thank you very much for your hard work. My name is Ed Jun, and I work here at Pfizer in Vaccines Regional Strategy. I have benefited greatly from networking, learning, and receiving mentoring from members of the Asian American Business Development Center. One thing I've learned is that it's not enough to succeed and do well for yourself in life. Personal success, personal recognition, advancement in your own career and family life is by itself not enough. Beyond just self, we have to think about others. Specifically, how can I help others? Help them to achieve similar success in their careers, in their business, and even in their personal growth. It's this reason that we are here today, to pay it forward. We are here to listen, learn, and share ideas and thoughts from several winners of the Outstanding 50 Asian Americans in Business, so that we can pay it forward, so that others may succeed, with today's focus being on millennials. I hope you enjoyed today's panel, and I also hope that you can walk away with a useful nugget of information, something that will help you in your personal life or career, and that someday you too can pass along that knowledge and pay it forward. At this time, I would like to introduce my friend and colleague, Christina Panton, who will then introduce our moderator and guest panelists. Christina is an amazing woman and business leader. She is a senior vice president at Abernathy McGregor, a financial communications agency, and has worked for more than 2 decades with Reuters News Agency in the US and abroad. She was a recipient of the Outstanding 50 Asian Americans in Business Award in 2016 and has been a communications advisor to the AABDC for the last 2 years. If you haven't had the chance to speak with her and meet her, I strongly suggest you do so before you leave today. Christina.
What a nice introduction, Ed. And Ed was too modest to mention that he himself was an award winner last year. So we're in very, very good company today. I'm curious, who in this audience is a recipient of the Outstanding 50 Award besides our distinguished panel? Okay, there are a few hands here. So welcome and thank you very much. This is an exciting fruition of an idea that came about a few months ago. I was beginning to think that John Wang, who is of course the patriarch of all of this, who's making all this possible, John, had accumulated such a valuable group of people, so talented, and I thought there has to be something we can do with this group. So it was wonderful when Pfizer stepped up and said that they would host the inaugural Voices panel, which we hope will be a tradition, perhaps once every other month, once a month, but we will depend on you, the community, the audience, to support it and to come forth with ideas as well. I think it's very fitting that we're starting with the topic of millennials. It's a very hot topic. It's something that we all grapple with, whether or not we are millennials. And it's one of those things that we think we will get a lot of interesting new information about from this particular panel because they come from very diverse areas. I do want to give a shout out to our roundtable, which is going to be in January. There's a little white slip of paper in this notebook. Please take a look at it. It's a save the date. This is going to be a special one because it features the new majority. And the new majority, of course, refers to the accumulation of the main minority groups, the Asians, Hispanics, and African Americans. I think it's going to be very powerful. It's 2 days. JP Morgan Chase has agreed to help us host it at their conference center. So please be on the lookout for the full agenda, and I hope that you will come out in support of it. It's in New York City, too. The last 2 were in Vegas. So it makes it very easy for those of us who are located here. Let me move on to introduce our moderator as well as our panelists. Michelle Giuda was also a 2016 Outstanding 50 Award winner. She's the Senior Vice President for Global Corporate Communications for Weber Shandwick. For 5 years, she was a lead member of former Speaker Newt Gingrich's press team. And what I found very intriguing about her is she's very athletic. She was on the UCLA, she was the team captain for the women's gymnastics team and an NCAA champion. So she's been also a very strong supporter of this organization and has been a wonderful resource for us, Michelle. Our panelists, Jennifer Cheng is an M&A partner at Reed & Smith. She is one of the youngest partners at the firm. She made partner at 34. It's remarkable. And she very aptly works a lot in diversity. I was just talking to her just now. She works very closely with diversity issues, as well as promoting women on corporate boards. It's something that's very dear to her heart, so I think she's very well placed to be on this panel. Ran Zheng is a managing partner of Clear Mountain Capital. It's a real estate investment fund. It focuses on residential and commercial real estate, as well as equity investors. I know he'll tell us more about his adventures and what he does there. Joe is an entrepreneur. He's an angel investor in biotech. He manages teams. We were talking a little bit about that, the challenge of managing teams and how they're different overseas and here in the US, so I think we'll hear a bit more about that. I always like to look at the hobbies as well. He's a professional boxer, so watch out. And he was in the Olympic trials for China, so I think he's a very good boxer, so I wouldn't get on his bad side. And with that, I'm going to turn over to Michelle and to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. I'll make sure not to ask you tough questions, Joe. So I thought before we get into our discussion today about millennials, from our panel, I would take you through some key trends that we're seeing across the millennial generation. I know there are some facts that a lot of people know about millennials, right? They are the most diverse generation here in the United States. As we know, they're also the largest now. They recently surpassed baby boomers as the largest generation in the United States. I think there's 85 million and growing quickly. But pertinent to our conversation today, you know, what are the trends about millennials as compared to other generations that are really impacting the way businesses and organizations and managers and leaders are interacting with millennials? So I thought I'd take you through a few quick trends, and then we can talk with our panels for their insights. So first, like I said, we know a lot about millennials, but when it comes to them in the workplace, what we found through our research at Weber Shandwick, and by the way, Dr. Leslie Gaines-Ross, who is our chief reputation strategist, has spearheaded a lot of these trends on millennial research. So if you have questions, she can answer them later. But millennials take their reputation very seriously at work as compared to other Gen Xers and baby boomers. So they think about their reputations a lot. It makes a big difference to them. So if you're an employer thinking about, you know, how millennials are perceived in the workplace and how important they think that is, it's something to consider with workplace culture. Millennials are also shaping employer reputations. So you think about millennials now, they have social media, they have iPhones with them all the time, and they're engaged on social media, and that's really done a lot to inspire a new social movement with how they talk about either for or against their company, right? And so they're out there talking and advocating for their employers, but what we found through our research is that they sometimes need a little bit more to like about their employer. So if you look at a few key categories, right, internal communications, only about a third of millennials think that they would rate their company highly on internal communications. When it comes to CSR and corporate social responsibility, again, less than a third would rate their company highly. Same thing with HR and employee development and leadership. So they're out there and they're looking for value in these areas, but they don't quite see it just yet. So there's a big opportunity there for employees to deliver value in these key areas. Millennials also make decisions about who they want to go work for and who they want to stay working for based on CEO reputation. So compared to boomer executives, for example, millennials are a lot more likely to say that the reputation of their CEO influenced their decision to take a job with the company. 55% are more likely to say that the CEO's reputation influences his or her decision to remain at the job. So when you're a company and you're thinking about the visibility and the reputation of your CEO, it matters a lot to millennials who are looking to come work for your company or stay at your company. And here's a quick snapshot. They're following executives on social media. They're following their own executives, their CEOs on social media, and they're following other executives. So as you think about a digital and social media strategy for executives within a company, millennials are really paying attention. And millennials have higher expectations for gender parity in the C-suite. We know this is a big conversation happening in the world today, and it really is a big reputational factor for them. They're more optimistic when it comes to achieving gender equality by 2030, which is a common number used by He for She and other initiatives, for example. So they're optimistic about it, and they place a really high importance on it as well. As you can see here, it's more important to millennials to achieve gender equality at the C-suite level as compared to baby boomers or Gen Xers. And they also think it's really important for women to advance into leadership positions at their own company. So that, again, is a factor that millennials are looking at when it comes to companies and employers. Along that same line, diversity and inclusion, and a little bit about what we're talking here today is really important to millennials. Some quick headlines here, they're really more so than other generations, very comfortable talking about diversity and inclusion, and in the United States that's not a surprise, right, because we are the most diverse generation in America. They think it's an important factor when it comes to job searches, of course, and then regardless of generations, so this is for millennials, Gen Xers, and boomers, they acknowledge that they have more diversity at their work than in their outside lives, which is really interesting when you think about the value of diversity and inclusion for people and their lives. Oh, clicker, please. I think I'm stuck here. Oh, there we go. Couple more here. So millennials are also really favorable of CEO activism. So as you've noticed, if you watch the news, companies are really speaking out on very important political and social issues these days, so CEOs and their companies. And when you look at the sentiment around that across generations, millennials are really favorable about it, right? We know they place a lot of importance on purpose and value when it comes to companies. And so quickly, there's a lot of numbers and colors here, but the headlines are, millennials are really favorable about CEOs speaking out on issues, more so than Gen Xers and baby boomers. They also think that it influences their purchase decisions. So whether a CEO is speaking out on issues really makes an impact on whether a millennial decides to be a customer of that business. And CEO activism also influences loyalty. So millennials are more loyal if their CEO takes a position on a hotly debated current issue. So there's a lot of reputational considerations at play when it comes to speaking out on issues. Again, purpose impacts buying behavior and job searches for millennials. And then last but not least, as we think about how business is really developing these days, and technology and how it's impacting businesses, when it comes to artificial intelligence, millennials are really ready, right? They grow up around technology and digital and social media, so they are very likely to have deep knowledge about AI and to use an AI product. So as companies are thinking about that, millennials are a prime audience. But when it comes to them from a consumer point of view, they're also more willing to trust AI in certain cases. So here, for example, they're very willing to trust AI for childcare, which we, Gen Xers and boomers may not be interested in. But really important to know, right, if you're thinking about changing your business and what consumers are thinking. But then from an employment point of view, millennials have significant fears of job loss. So if you look as compared to Gen Xers and boomers, they are a little bit worried about artificial intelligence and automation in replacing their jobs. So as you're thinking about workplace culture and the direction that your business is headed, millennials are an important audience to engage. And so with that, we'll talk with our esteemed panelists about their experience. I'm going to switch mics here. Is this on? It is now. Or I can just talk loudly. So let's start with the workplace, right? We saw some research on millennial employees in the workplace and how they're behaving. Jennifer, we'll start with you. From your point of view, at your law firm, I know you work on the recruiting committee, right? So what sorts of things are you thinking about, and what strategies do you see as being really effective in recruiting millennials?
Sure. So, it's interesting for me because I'm a millennial myself, but I'm also recruiting millennials. We recruit, when we say recruiting, we talk about recruiting lateral candidates from other law firms of various levels of seniority, as well as law students fresh out of law school looking to start their careers. And the thing that I've increasingly noticed is, I think, if you look at maybe 5 or 10 years ago, a lot of law students still think, getting into a law firm, global law firm, that pays top dollar is the be all and end all, and all they want is an interview and get a position. Now to, some of the earlier points that you mentioned, they ask questions about diversity and inclusion initiatives. They ask how many female partners there are if, they're a female candidate. They ask, what are the opportunities long term for someone like me, or what are, in some cases, actually, they even ask about exit opportunities because, they recognize that they might not be in the same firm for 10 years and then make partner, which is the amount of time it typically takes these days at the shortest amount of time. And I think one thing that, when I'm on the recruiting committee, we're really cognizant of is you really have to speak to that. You have to say, look, we appreciate talent. We, of course, want to recruit the best people. Now, I don't know if becoming a partner 10 years later in life is for you. I don't know, you may try this for a few years and find out that's not for you, but that's okay. And we have other opportunities. We help place, people in-house to other in-house jobs with our clients in legal departments of, big companies like, Pfizer, for instance, or GE. And we talk about, the ability to let them do. We have a lot of actually our associates who have their own businesses on the side. That's something we accommodate. And I think we are very focus on emphasizing that as a firm, we're very entrepreneurial, and we recognize that a lot of the associates and the law students these days have an entrepreneurial spirit themselves, and that's something that we value and we encourage in millennial recruits.
That's really interesting, and actually, we have two entrepreneurs on our panel. So it'd be interesting to hear from your perspective, Ron, and Joe, your experiences in recruiting millennials, or when they come to you, what types of questions are they asking? Because it is different, right? Going to interview at a law firm in a big multinational company versus working at more startup or entrepreneurial ventures, right? So what sorts of trends are you seeing?
Well, for us, we do a lot of construction and development related work. So hiring-wise, on the phone level, we don't really hire that much because it's a very lean and small community. And that's much more based on the experience than, say, like age difference, because millennials are usually younger and lesser experienced in this field. But it's very interesting to look at some of the contractors that we hire. We actually recently hired a contractor that's a millennial, that's I think in his early 30s, and we interviewed him along with a bunch of other builders who are probably in their 50s or late 40s or something like that. The younger builder was definitely pushing way more on the edge of the envelope when it comes to rules, when it comes to building, when it comes to how you deal with the regulations of the town than the older, more experienced builders. So like for me, a lot of these younger millennials, when we work together and on a subcontractor level, they're more innovative and they want to like push the envelope, like push the limit on what they could do, versus the more experienced people. They're more following like the steps or the stuff they've done before. So that's my 2 cents.
So how does that play in then when you manage them, right? Because that's another topic, right? Managing millennials. Everybody's, there's certain stereotypes that exist, but you're saying, they're really pushing the envelope, and that can be good and bad, right? So do you see that as, an opportunity, or is it a challenge sometimes?
I mean, Joe probably managed more people, but like for me, it definitely like when you want to build like 3 walls to just make a walkout basement, definitely need to look at what are the cost benefit to like realizing all these changes, versus a more experienced builder. You're pushing him in another direction. Like, can we do this? Can we save money on making the backyard a little flatter or something like that? So it's definitely different. Like, so millennials, you're trying to keep them contained on their crazy thoughts, and for the more experienced people, you kind of wanted them to be a little bit more creative. Yeah.
So it's finding a nice balance, right? It seems like, some of the older generations could learn from that out-of-the-box thinking from millennials, and then vice versa, right, when it comes to thinking. So, and then Joe, in your experience working across the globe with millennials, what sort of trends are you recognizing? Because we talk about millennials as being the most diverse generation in the United States, but then if you're thinking on a global scale, right, there's millennials all over the world. So what sorts of trends are you seeing around, millennials in China and some of the work that you do there?
Certainly, the aspect that the company has to have a particular purpose, the drive. They're very interested at this point, a lot of millennials, in the aspect of what is the company doing for the greater good. So the vision and purpose, I think, is more overly emphasized as opposed to just collecting a paycheck. Ownership over whether it's from giving them responsibility and management, I think really, they don't want to be followers. Everybody wants to be a leader now. So because of that, giving some type of, let's call it artificial control or artificial responsibility, where really they're basically just doing they're doing the same thing, but you just have to give them, you have to display it, you have to present it in a different fashion because they want ownership. They want to feel like this is their project. And you find this a lot with difficulties in terms of management where if you, and this works for all generations, but especially from a millennial standpoint, if you're a corporation or a startup that's constantly shifting directions, and you have this a lot, especially on the startup side, where you have to switch direction very often. But if your employees are working on a particular project and all of a sudden it says, no, we're going in another direction, that sense of ownership immediately gets destroyed. And the after effect of that is actually pretty dramatic with millennials as opposed to some of the older generations. So we're seeing that a lot. The other aspect to it is work-life balance becomes extremely important. It's, in China, certainly the tier 1 cities, I mean, they're very much, this is the time I get off and this is what it is. But the tier 2, tier 3 cities, which is where we hire up most of our people, I joke about this all the time. One of the biggest joint ventures that I put together, I'm sitting and having dinner with the CEO of the largest playground equipment manufacturer in China. And we've come up with this idea, and all of a sudden he gets on the phone, calls up his entire executive team and says, get over here right now. I want you guys to take notes. So here I am sitting with the CEO, we're sitting there drinking and eating and having a good time, and his entire staff is here taking notes and writing down and thinking of ideas. If you would have done that in the United States, that is an HR nightmare that you'd be shut down tomorrow. But that's what you can do more so in the tier 2, tier 3 cities because the work-life balance and the work-life culture of that aspect is outdriven by just the pure ambition and drive that these guys have to make money. So it differs certainly.
Right, so when it comes to millennials, there really is no one-size-fits-all approach, right?
Yeah.
You have to think about the community, the company, the geography
Yeah.
in general. So the interesting thing is, so we're talking a lot about managing millennials, and that's a big topic of conversation when it comes to millennials in the workplace. But I'm sitting here, and you are the youngest partner at your firm, and you both own very successful ventures of your own. So millennials aren't just being managed, they're managers now, right? And so you're managing teams and companies on your own. So what is important for our friends here to know about millennials as managers, right? Because oftentimes you're managing people who are younger than you, but now you're starting to manage people who are older than you, right? And have been in the workforce longer. So what's your experience been like doing that, and what tips do you have?
I mean, I could start. As soon as you said that, actually, is something that happened a few weeks ago came to mind when, a lot of the times when I've signed up or closed a big deal, I take my associates out. Doesn't matter if they're the most junior associate to the senior associate. But, I was sitting with, he was a 5th-year associate, and we were having a drink at our favorite watering hole. And he was getting texts from all his friends from other law firms. I was like, what are you doing? He was like, I'm having a drink with my partner. And all the texts that came back were, what are you talking about? Does that happen? We've never done that. No partner's ever invited us out to drinks. You seem to really like this firm for whatever reason, but now I think we're starting to get it. And I think as a young partner, the lines that traditionally have been drawn, especially at traditional law firms, apply less and less with the younger generation of partners like myself. Like, I would agree that when I was an associate, like, I don't remember any time when a partner invited me out for a drink just because we closed a deal and, it was spontaneous and it wasn't like some big thing. And I think when I think of managing, millennial associates, that's something they really appreciate. I mean, for me, as long as the respect is there when they work with me, I don't mind being, what they consider, to be more friendly. And I actually think that's more effective in terms of managing them because as long as they respect you, they want to work with you, they want to put in their best work. And, to the points that was raised by the panelists earlier, as long as you give them sense of ownership over their task, in my case, every deal of mine, each associate, no matter what level, has their own project that they're responsible for. And then I talk to them directly rather than I think in, kind of the more traditional way is it has to run up the chain. The first year associate has to talk to the third year associate who then talks to the fifth year associate, and then the fifth year associate is only one who talks to me, and none of the junior associates get to talk to me. That's how it used to be. That's certainly not how I manage my teams, and I don't think that should be the case, especially with millennials. They don't feel valued. They feel like they're siloed, and I don't think that's an approach that works well.
That's interesting. I didn't touch on this, but one of the pieces of our research is that millennials, in addition to job performance, et cetera, really value the social aspect of work as impacting their reputation and something that they think about in the workplace. So it sounds like as millennials are increasingly managing other millennials or people in general, those walls are being torn down. I'm curious, who in here manages millennials or has to work very closely with them? Yeah, there's a lot, and there will be more, I'm sure. Now, Ron, what about your experience?
I mean, to the similar points as these two are talking about is the millennials are definitely more value and culture. Like they want to realize something in their ambition, right? Like so, a lot of my friends who are like literally on the executive and the top level of the real estate development in New York City. They are very young people that are having huge responsibility, literally managing like billions of dollars of investment. One of my closest friends is managing the development of Nordstrom Tower, which is like the tallest building in New York City in the next few years. And I feel like the reason he got there was because he had this passion out of college that he really wanted to be in real estate development, to be part of the community, and he got there because he worked really hard. He was value driven, and he was on the same page as the CEO of the company that had this vision and shared this vision with him, and I feel that's the story for a lot of the millennials and the millennial managers is that they're ambitious, and they got there because they have this ambition, and their value was treasured by the executive level of the company.
And Joe, how about in your experience?
So we're starting to see more, it's the high-level CEO that's 24 years old, that's managing a ton of, whether it's sales teams or whatever it might be. But I think it's also important to put certain managers in certain positions that are, I wouldn't, just purely from the ability to connect and the ability to actually manage. Most times if we're doing B2B sales, I'm having older sales individuals, and I'm having their managers be older as well. Because the young gun, while has a lot of great ideas, at the end of the day has difficulties corralling and putting that together. Now at the same time, there are certain comments. I fired one executive once because he said to me, when you get to my age, you'll know this. And instantly I knew from that perspective, I said, we'll never connect again. If you see it from this perspective, you're gone. So, we've had to do a lot of firings because of that. And millennials at the same time that have tried to tell me, you don't get it because of this and this and this. Well, if you're not trying to understand or trying to reflect on the other side from a management perspective, you're going to fail. So we tried to make sure that our managers are certainly seeing both sides of the table as well.
And so all of you, as Christina noted, are members of the Outstanding 50 and have been recognized as leaders in business. What advice do you have for millennials who are here in the audience today on building a strong reputation, both personally and professionally? And I guess those sort of collide now, right? There is no difference between your personal and professional reputation. But what advice do you have for millennials here in excelling the way you have?
So from my perspective, I think authenticity is something that millennials really look for. The danger right now with corporations is nobody trusts corporations anymore. There's certainly the millennial side of things. So they don't trust corporations. So there's the lack of authenticity that they don't believe it. But it's funny because nowadays, there's that joke on Facebook. It's 50 years ago everybody trusted the Surgeon General. 20 years ago they trusted the new health expert. Now they trust the mom next door. But it's because they feel it's authentic. And that's the reason why they want to trust the person that's right next door, even though that person, I love seeing they were a scientist. You look back on it, it's like, not really. But that's, from a building social brand and building social, who you are, I've always told friends of mine who are in business, like, don't just post stuff about business. You're boring. I was like, you want to be creative, you want to be fun. Post, that you're jet setting and doing this and doing that. And that's more authentic in terms of from a connection brand perspective.
Along with the authentication, like I feel like you want to be authentic, but you don't want to show too much of your millennial side of like the stereotypical of like
Yeah, it's true. You have to balance
yeah,
that.
yeah, exactly. And I feel like one of
Not all my club photos.
yeah, one of the greatest advice that I feel I got before, and I feel the millennials should care about is care about your reputation before you have one, because you're like right now as a younger people like when you go into a workplace, nobody really knows who you are, and you really need to build your steps there. You can't just think of that. You can be ambitious and just push envelopes without consequence. Like there are consequences attached to every action that you take, and like posting pictures, right? Like so I feel like you need to think about what are your consequences and how you can build up your reputation to be successful, to be recognized, and to be respected by other people.
Yeah, I think I definitely echo a lot of what you both have said. And in particular with the authenticity point, I think maybe when I first started out in my career, I didn't really understand that point as well. And also I've always worked in, big law firms. That's always, where my career's been at. And when I started perhaps as a more junior associate, I always thought, I worked at a big law firm. Partners are all, 50s or older, and then for the most part, white men, and they have clients like GE, big global corporations. Gee, I must need to be more like them to one day be a partner and get business like that. Well, happy to say, well, A, I can't be one, and I figured that out pretty quickly, and B, by being myself in some ways, what was really surprised me about my journey to make it to partner and now building a book of business and a practice is, I've acknowledged that it's not easy, and I've acknowledged, the difficulties that I have to face along the way, and I would have thought, clients took that as a weakness, but what actually happened was, my professional reputation was solid. There was no question about that, and they're like, wow, we want to give her a hand. We want to, we want to help her because she obviously has, great, deal sheet, great deal experience, and we need to give someone like that an opportunity. And so, happy to say that I work with some of the biggest clients that, the older firms that I've been at a couple other firms before this, same clients that at first I thought when I was a more junior associate, how am I ever going to do that? But actually by being more authentic and kind of, owning up to my career experience, that's actually worked out really well. And I think that's the authenticity point.
So when it comes to being your true self as millennials, there are obviously a lot of stereotypes out there around millennials, that they're entitled, maybe a little lazy or crazy, perhaps, that they're always looking for a new job, right? When they're interviewing with a company, maybe they're not going to be there for a long time. What's the most erroneous myth out there that you want to correct the record on? And then what is actually true?
Wow.
Tough question.
I don't think millennials are lazy. Like I think, all of us here, we work really hard, and we work really hard, I think, if we find the right thing and the thing that we think is worth working hard for. So I don't think, I do think it's erroneous to say that millennials don't work hard or are lazy. I think they need the right motivation and the right, find the right cause or the right thing. Then they'll work as hard as anybody, around.
And I feel like it comes with the time that millennials grew up in, right? Like they feel entitled in a way that technology. They grew up with technology, so they're entitled to using their smartphones every day, right? Their adaptation to technology is way faster than anyone else, and they think like technology can solve all the problems that were not resolved in the older generations. Like a lot of stuff is done by hand, by labor, so they feel like labor is not as important as maybe knowledge, right? So that lazy and entitled part I feel it's part of like how you grew up to be who you are, and I feel like on the other hand is like they want to do things that realize their value, and I feel that's also something that they grew up with. Like parents always teach you like you need to have a good value, you need to be a responsible social citizen, and that's just part of your personality.
I don't think we can compare it to typical millennials, given all of us that are Asian. So we do have the tiger mom syndrome. So that beat out any entitlement that we originally grew up with. but to that point, I think the aspect with millennials nowadays is they're so informed. They have so much the access to information at this point. There's 8-year-olds that know about they're reading news at this point. Just this summer, I was talking with these students from Harvard, and their amount of political information and the grasp that they have on the world today and their want to be involved in that aspect is pretty incredible. It's very, very impactful in that sense. But at the same time, a lot of their information is very filtered to what they want to see. So the aspect that we call millennials are snowflakes, millennials are sensitive. They are sensitive. They don't want to hear information that they don't necessarily want to, they might disagree with. So we've had this issue sometimes from a board level, where millennials, it's a good board should have argument. A good board should have conflicting views, but at the end of the day, be able to come together and still focus on the direction, the overall objective. You have issues where dissent causes hurt feelings, and that's something that we don't agree with. And frankly, they are more sensitive. It is what it is, and in large part because it's especially from a workplace standpoint. My father grew up in the Cultural Revolution. He was hungry. I've never been hungry in my entire life. So for him, work, going to school, everything like this, it was, I'm doing this because so I can have, the internal anchor is always anchored on, I'm doing this so I can eat. For me, if I don't want to learn this, I'm not going to learn it because it doesn't have a purpose. So I'm very selective in that sense, and I never had to be hungry for that reason.
And I think that's a great point, because like growing up, trying to work to live is very different. That's not a concept I feel most millennials grew up with. Like most people are well fed, right? Like you don't have to like wake up tomorrow and thinking like, oh, can't have dinner again. Yeah. Like have to wait until the new year to eat dumplings, right? so like that's something that millennials didn't grow up with, and I feel that's what gave them the risk-taking opportunity, right? Like they don't have to think about food.
Do you think that that's something that is unique to or a characteristic of Asian American millennials in particular? Because if you're thinking about, we know millennials are the most diverse generation, at least in the United States.
You guys did go through the Great Depression, so
yeah.
I mean, in the U.S., right? So that's what a lot of the older generations experience as well. Like it's through the multiple rounds of economic cycle, the Great Depression, and then the dot-com bubble, or the most recent housing bubble. Like people experience difficulties that a lot of times I feel millennials are sheltered from those difficulties growing up.
It's a great point. So we'll have one more point and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. But so your final headline thought, what is the one most important thing you want our friends in the audience here to know about millennials, either as managers of millennials and working with them as employees, or as customers, or friends and colleagues in general? What is your parting thoughts of wisdom on millennials? Joe.
So I think it's ever evolving from how you manage. I mean, the way you manage 15 years ago changes today. And it's not just necessarily the aspects of millennials, it's also the perspective of new studies and new aspects of how to increase productivity from that sense. But a lot of old managers they have difficulties with change. And we're creatures of habit. We do what we are used to. But when we have new problems, and ultimately new problems become the millennial generation, you have to constantly evolve in that sense. So it's, good businesses, good entrepreneurs, successful individuals know how to adapt and change to the current environment. So we can complain all we want about millennials, and trust me, I complain just as much as the old manager does about how, we have to manage these snowflakes and how everybody's sensitive and PC and what yada, yada, yada. But this is the changing times, and any company that needs to be successful, it has to change with the times. So understanding and being able to adapt is very critical to success.
And I think to engage millennials is like how you adapt to technology, right? Like you have to figure out what's the best way to communicate with them, what's the best way to engage them. Just like how you learn to use your iPhone, what's the best way to go to use certain apps and how to use certain apps to do the tasks that you do. There are definitely different characteristics about millennials that that's different from how they work, communicate in the workplace, how they want to be engaged after work, and try to your point of social environment and stuff like that. Like it may be different, and to Joe's point, you need to adapt to those certain behaviors, just like how technology is changing all the time.
Yeah, and I think agree with everything my fellow panelists said, but I think also one size really doesn't fit all. I think for you to successfully retain the best talent and to really engage them, you have to really listen to them about what they want to achieve. And again, it goes back to the whole making sure they have the right opportunities so that they will want to stay and feel responsible and feel they have a sense of ownership. And again, that will differ for each person. It's not, all millennials to have tasks that involve a lot of technology, or there's no generalization like that. And also I think that, again, really listen to what they have to say and try to incorporate their opinions or their suggestions. And again, that's all just about having them feel involved in a part of the team.
To add to that point, recently there was the book that just got published about Bridgewater, from the perspective of they actually created baseball cards based on individual personalities, and they had basically all their employees take the Myers-Briggs test and a number of other various personality tests, and being able to pair and how to manage those individuals. We're now into the world of customization and specialization to each particular individual. So managers now can have an interesting profile of how this person is managed, or better managed and better spoken to, based on this aspect of this personality profile. So I think there's ways to leverage technology to utilize it with millennials. I mean, nowadays to have a millennial fill out a profile and say, this is who I am as an individual, is a sense of ownership on their part, but being able to utilize that to better manage them is something very interesting. And having just read that, I'm like, how do I start putting my partners, and how do I start getting people to take these employee tests and such? So, it's an interesting way that things are being done now with the technology advantage as well.
And so listening and learning is a huge part of it, right? So it's not just talking at millennials or with millennials, but engaging millennials really has to do with listening to them, understanding what resonates best, right?
Everybody wants a voice.
Yeah. So do we have questions from the audience?
Hey, just in the interest of straight talk. Oh, you want me to? Oh, okay, thanks. Hi, my name's Sarah, and in the interest of straight talk, I wanted to ask, first an observation. I think for people of color in the U.S. who grew up in a certain time, it's safe to say that many have felt, hey, I have to be 10 times better than, let's say, whatever's seen as the norm, a white guy or white woman, to be successful or to achieve a certain level of success or be seen as being successful. Is this changing, do you feel, in your workplaces? And similarly, when if a person of color makes a mistake or has certain quirks, let's say in how they, even a turn of phrase or tone of voice, I've seen that this, in workplaces I've been, where that could be magnified for the person versus, if another person had said such things. So I'm really curious about how you see that changing or not with this quote, generational change. Thanks.
In terms of from a racial understanding standpoint, so I've a very interesting background from growing up both in Detroit, inner city, and then having to then transfer to Champaign, Illinois for both high school and college. You know, I went from inner city to country town USA. And, you know, I've faced racism my entire life from those dynamics, but it wasn't just, you know, it was a lack of understanding more so than anything. You know, I've had, you know, friends of mine now that I grew up with that, you know, have called me racial comments starting out, but now, you know, I've kind of, we're now friends and we've accepted it. It's more of an aspect of understanding because they've never met a Chinese guy before, and I was the only Chinese kid growing up in both elementary, middle school, and high school. Where millennials are now, I think, is they have more interactions in that sense. So they're more accepting because they have a better understanding. You know, they grew up with individuals. They went to college with less segregation has opened up more understanding and more interest in that sense. So that's the opportunity, I think, in a sense that millennials are becoming more and more engaged, where there's less segregation because of that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. You said, you know, that you got the feeling that you have to be 10 times as good as I've certainly felt that way. And even to this day, I think, you know, while I agree with what my panelists are saying, that I think things will change for the better, you know, I would say only a couple months ago, I was making a pitch to a general counsel of a public company, and he was in his 50s and a white man. And I was supposed to meet with him, but then I got a call from the relationship partner saying, you know, actually, don't worry about it. And I said, why? You know, what changed in the last day or so? And he was like, I'm just going to be honest with you. He wants someone with more gray hair. I know what that means. On the flip side, you know, I increasingly have clients who are in, you know, positions like, you know, one of my key clients, the head of M&A for legal, is no more than a few years older than me. And he, you know, he may not be a millennial, but he's like closer in age, and he's been extremely supportive to him. Never mattered that I was a younger partner, and he saw my experience for what it was. And he also kind of grew up to your point. I think, you know, people around our age and our generation have grown up more around, you know, diversity and understand the issues. And in fact, that was something that I've seen some of my clients really support and have initiatives to make a conscious effort to hire diverse partners, for example. So I think slowly it will change, but, you know, maybe not overnight.
I'm glad you don't have gray hair at 34.
I aim to keep it that way.
Other questions?
First of all, I would like to thank openly to Mr. Wang for doing this incredible work. He continued to do this for the last so many years, and as a result of his commitment and stability, he was able to do this one as well. So really, we need to appreciate him. Thank you, John. I came from Africa myself. I'm African origin, Ethiopia. And for the last about 5 years, I do work there. I have a foundation. And I travel frequently, and I see a lot of Chinese. I mean, really, a lot. I don't even see that many Chinese in Chinatown. It's not exaggerating. And at times, they have this air filter on their nose, because, you know, definitely from my education and background, I learned, you know, it's polluted in many ways, China. So Ethiopia, being a very high mountain, beautiful country, so they enjoy the climate and the opportunities. I also learned for the last 2 years that a lot of Ethiopian high school and university students go to China to learn not only the culture, but the Mandarin, the language. So to me, that's an eye-opening. That's a good building bridges across culture and understanding, you know, building nations. So that's very good. My question is, when you are promoting from the individual to global is the whole world, how is Millennium trying to reach to other people, you know, not only Africa, but all over the world, because global is the whole world. So how are you planning to reach out and have an inclusive and transparent global action rather than only for the Asians.
Well, I feel they definitely have to reach out to globalization because the sheer, well, especially for China, because the sheer amount of people that are eligible to work that are younger are gone. That generation is not there anymore. So my family actually owns a water plant that refines polluted water, and they're expanding the machine plant. And literally all the construction workers are older than 40 years old because no young generation in China wants to do construction or any heavy lifting work. And those are the millennial trends, right? Like they're the generation that were sheltered in a way that they're the only child in China, and the parents don't want their kids to be a construction worker, right? They work their whole life not to be a construction worker, and then like your kids go work in construction, and you're like, what the hell? And I'm not talking about myself, but but I feel that's a big factor how they need to reach out to the global system, the global resources. And especially with the communications being so much more advanced, I remember like just being in the US for the past 10 years, I literally went from like dialing on my phone on a phone card to just use all voice over IP kind of communication with my parents in China. And I feel the globalization is meant to happen just because like they don't have the amount of people to do the labor anymore, and the economy is changing in a way that they need to have the global resources involved. And Joe here probably can talk more because like he does a lot of global work. Flies back to China every month.
From a millennial perspective, I mean, we're seeing just purely from an angel investment perspective, a lot of businesses are now social enterprises in the sense that they want to do a social order. They want to really, really benefit impoverished nations, whether it's creating global ties. You're seeing a lot more millennials trying to be involved with the UN and politics and such as that, in a sense that they want a sense of ownership and also making change because of the aspects of social media, because of the generation that they've grown up in. Millennials have a voice. Back then, a 20-year-old had no voice and no platform to shout to the stars, and now you have 20-year-olds both in China, in the U.S. You have these Instagram kings and whatnot that have 100,000, 200,000 followers. All of a sudden, you're a millennial with a voice, and being able to leverage that, I think, is one of the critical aspects. And a lot of millennials have found ways to be able to do that, both for positive good and for their own personal good as well. Both work well in that sense. So for corporations, for managers and investors and such, I mean, we have to find millennials that have that view and have that ambition and drive to be able to expand their horizons in that sense.
Thank you for this panel. I was curious what you think about political participation. My sense was that millennials didn't really show up to vote to the extent that would have been really great. And so millennials are very civic-minded and are passionate and care about all sorts of things. What do you think is ahead in terms of political participation and to create change in this country?
Well, I think the opportunity for them to be involved early on, as well as to be able to have a voice, I think is highly beneficial, as well as it's a tool that they can utilize. What I would say is, this isn't just a millennial problem, this is a worldwide problem, or just amongst humans in general. Most people all talk and no action. So just the difference now is that millennials have more of a voice to talk and shout and yell and complain about everything, but still it's the same percentage, 80-20 from an action standpoint, of those that are actually going out and being involved and getting to the polls and such as that. So it looks as a negative because millennials aren't getting out as much, but in terms of from a stat standpoint, millennials have been more involved as ever from that perspective. It's just, they just complain a lot more too, and everybody can hear it.
I think it might be, and this is my hypothesis, it might be that they also see other avenues for change, right? And this isn't just a millennial issue, but people who vote, it depends. Sometimes you think your vote makes a difference, and sometimes it doesn't. I think now that there's social media and digital platforms, there's another way to impact change and have a voice. You can launch a movement with a tweet and a hashtag. Maybe you don't have to vote. You can launch a movement through your company and affect real change for your company. So maybe they see other avenues, or maybe that's one piece of the answer. I think this gentleman next, and then we'll come to you.
I want to thank John for putting this together. My name is Rajiv Gabba, and the panel. You're right. I mean, millennials are doing many things. My son was supposed to be here. He's one of the millennials. That's why I want to bring him here. The point what she made is how you're coping in your workplace. Do we have to do more work? Do we have to prove that you are better than the other person? Well, it's just true. It's been true from day one. I happen to be the first guy elected in Staten Island as a school board president. I look around, everyone is different than me. I was the only guy. But I did, push myself. I said, wait a minute. I am not here just to make money. No, not for that. I came here to better myself. At the same time, I have civic sense. I want to contribute to the society. I want to take care of, whether the garbage is picked in the next street, if there is a garbage. So when you start doing these things, they start noticing. What's happening in the Asian American community is they are doing everything, but there are certain areas where they're supposed to focus, they are not there. Last election, I ran for city council, the first Asian American run from Staten Island. And when you look out during the primary election, like someone was talking about just now, there are many didn't come to vote. I asked him why. Oh, primary. Oh, I am registered, Mr. Gowda, but I couldn't vote. Why? Why not? I went there to the poll site. They told me I'm not registered, but I am registered. I said, wait a minute, let him give me your card. So what he was saying is, he is registered, yes, but he didn't pick the box there, whether Republican or Democrat, right? So he could not participate in the primary election. So there are issues. I mean, So yes, in the corporate world, we may be doing many things. It's good, fine, everything is nice. But unless you get into the shoes and as a policy maker, a lawmaker, right? These areas, I think they are not paying attention. I go to many places, I talk about it. When it comes to taking part in the election, they say, no, it's not for me. I don't fit in there. They're not going to appreciate. But I beg to differ that they want you. They want to see you. You just have to go and show that you are capable. That was my comment.
Hi, good evening. John, thank you, AABDC. I just want a couple, you actually stole my question, because that was what I wanted, because you have such, this generation have such power to effect change. And I've come across so many millennials that are so focused in their careers, right? And I will tell you, I do a lot of volunteer work, I do a lot of phone banking work, and when I call to remind people to go and vote, they say, oh no, I don't have time. And when you know that the polls are open from 6 in the morning to like 9 or 10 at night, it's hard for me to believe that you don't have time. But forget about that for a moment. I want to go back to Jennifer. What you said about that presentation, where they wanted someone with gray hair, white hair, to make that presentation, I'd like to hear, I'd like to know, did you go back to them and did you say anything? And then tying that to the model minority myth, right? So I'm sure no matter how successful you guys are up there, that person who's looking at you will see you as that yellow person, that they will see you as a perpetual foreigner. I'd like to know how you guys respond to issues like that, if you ever came across it, or what would you say?
So to speak specifically about that situation that I mentioned, so to answer your question, yeah, I did go back. After I asked the relationship partner why, and that was the response. I said, look, I didn't just send my picture. I also sent my entire deal sheet with my deal experience. Now it seems rather apparent that he didn't read it because I put the most relevant deal that I did in that space on the top, which was $1 billion plus. So, you know, look, there are some people's minds you can't change, but you know, you're the relationship partner. I'm not trying to jeopardize your client relationship, but could you please point out to him that I did this deal and I have this experience, and see if he still says the same thing to you? Because if it does, then it, you know, again, I'm not trying to damage your relationship, but I don't know that I want to work for someone like that either and have them as a client. So he did. He went back and, you know, showed this person and pointed that out specifically. And then he came back and said, so he will meet with you. He still wants other people with gray hair, though. And I'm like, yes, it's and I'm just like, so you're gonna put partners in there with me with gray hair who don't do any of what they're asking for, but just because. It's like, that's the best I can do. I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna get in that room and I'm just gonna impress and forget about the others. That was my aim. I got in there, the very first thing, you know, after I made introductions was, Jennifer, just so you know, I did this deal 2 years ago in this space worth this much, and these are the issues and so on. And by the end of it, it wasn't a total win because the next day I got an email from the relationship partner saying, hey, everybody, great job. You know, he was impressed with every single one, even you, Amy. I'm like, who is, pardon swear word, Amy? And then I scrolled down, and the email chain from the general counsel, it says, very impressed with everyone. I didn't realize Amy had such great deal experience. From then on, I think my name had been very, basically what I said was like, you know what? He just needs to hire us and he'll never forget my name again. And that's basically how I handled that particular situation. But to your point, that was one situation. There'll be others. And I don't know that I have a one-size-fits-all approach to address those situations, but I will say I don't take it for granted that I have to just take it and move on. Sometimes that may have to be the case. There are some people's minds you can't change, but I generally, you know, see what I can do with that, even if my name ends up being Amy.
Yeah.
So I was actually, Ren and I were talking just before this, and I was mentioning a business venture that I've been thinking about starting, just more of a fun gig at this point. But, you know, I have a rule. I've had a rule ever since I started in business. When I started my first company in college at 18, was no matter what, I'll always have a co-founder, and I always have to have a co-founder with gray hair. I think the reality of it is, you know, perceptions matter. It is what it is. You know, we can always talk about how we want to be in this fair community and everything is fair, but you know, the reality is I'm a Chinese American and I'm young. I better find an old white dude to be my partner. You know, because that's the way to close deals. And even to this day, a lot of my partners in the United States, you know, I'll do 60, 70% of the work, but I bring them in to close the final, to get the final check signed. And whatever it might be, you know, there's an acceptance that has to sometimes that's required to be successful in that sense. And I accepted the fact that I was young. People would look at me young. They wouldn't trust me with millions of dollars. So I got to find somebody that they're going to trust. And that was basically what it was. And I do the hustle and I do the running. And, you know, they just be the face guy.
Just put them in a comfort zone.
Yeah.
80-20 rule. 80% you, 20%
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Giuda and one of the outstanding 50 awardees and a boomer. So I want to go back to the perspective of the perception of laziness of millennials. It's just a perspective because, as you had alluded, your parents and everybody grew up with all of the hardships. And then when somebody comes to work for you and says, you can't stay after 5 o'clock to finish this. So the first time I got that, I was in shock. So that was my first instinct. But I realized when I listened, and millennials also have work-life balance demands, right? So you respect that and you see that perspective, but as long as but you can also see that millennials also work faster because they are multitaskers. So it's a perspective, and millennials also should understand where the boomers are coming from. So, understanding will make the place a better world, I think.
Yes, hello. My name is Aysolu Sartbaeva, and I am from Level Group. We're doing real estate. But I want to talk more about the millennials. And my daughter, she's 18. Maybe she's not millennials yet, but almost there. And we was talking, right now we're preparing for college, right? And she says right now they even, I don't know if it's good or bad that for Asian youngers, they did little higher percentage of the, I don't know, they think that the Asians is more smart, or I don't know why. They hire the score for the colleges, because because right now in the college many Asian young peoples, and they did little higher score for them. I don't know it is right or bad, good or bad, but I say it is good, because you have to be now smarter. You have to be work more, because they think that if you are Asian, you are more smart. So, and I think it is like this way. So, and I think about the white, gray, wherever, wherever is that, we always faced with this not problem. Sometimes somebody says it is you're Asian, somebody says it is you're Russian. We are Asian, but we are Russian. We speak Russian language, we speak, and they says, oh, Russian mafia and plus Asian. I don't know what to say. So, but my kids, I have 3 kids, and they're good. They're good. My babies, they 18 years and 16 years, daughter is son, and they go to Harlem High School. No Asian over there, no even white over there, but we're okay, we're good with that. So, and I think that I am agree with the panelists that right now younger generation is so simple. They're not like telling you are black, you are white, you are this, you are that. No, they're like kids. They're talking each other, they're playing with each other, and no problem with that, really. And thank you so much for everyone. Thank you.
Hi, panel. I'm a student. My name is Cheng, and I'm a first-year graduate student from Hofstra University. And my question would be, I have noticed there's a trend for the traditional different industries to be, the boundaries of traditional industries to be less and less clear, especially for the companies that has the larger portion of millennials. And for this kind of thing, back in 20 or 25 years ago, we can never imagine a company like Tesla that can build that kind of a car solely powered by the electricity. And now I heard of a humor that Apple is making their own Apple car, but they're famous for making the phones. So for this kind of trend of emerging from different industries, so do you have any say for this, or any suggestions for the students who are looking for jobs, right?
You mean like companies are doing everything, like how do you fit into the company?
Yeah, my question would be like for the industries, the older industries, would they to retain to do what they are really good at doing, or stretch hands for new industries? And for those newer industries that hire a larger portion of millennials, what do they do? And for the students who are looking for jobs and building their own career paths, am I going to stretch my hands for the new companies that they're doing multiple business, or do I just try to apply for the traditional industries? Yeah.
I mean, you're like me and Joe are more in the, I guess, younger, like more innovative side, and Jennifer, you're more on the the older legal side, right? With more gray hair side, traditional side. But I feel it's not about how you fit the company. Like it's what you want to do. What's your passion? What's your skill? What's your contribution to the society versus just you tailoring yourself to a company? Because I feel like if you're trying to fit what the company wants, then some of the company don't even know what they want, right? So like I feel you should focus more on like as a grad student, as somebody who's still like in school. I actually see this a lot from like a lot of my family friends who go into school, don't really know what they're doing, and just getting an MBA to get an MBA, just going to school to be in school. Learn something that you really like and find out where your passion is. Because if you work for some company that you're not passionate about, and this goes back to what we're talking about millennials associate their ethics with the CEO, the company culture. I think you belong in that, and if you find something that you're really passionate about, you will do well.
To that point as well, in regards to millennials being part of these new technology companies or such, in large part it's because of the industries that are technology innovations. When the internet came, CES became a new major. So because CES became a major, millennials were able to basically learn this skill and thus fed into this internet revolution, as opposed to from a retraining standpoint, if you're past the internet age in that sense, you're not going back to school to learn CS. So technology innovation, a good way in terms of what are the future companies going to be hiring for? What are the new majors out there? What are the new focuses that are being demanded on the course structure and class structure right now? Because that is going to be driving the jobs right now. That's what companies need. Companies tell universities, hey, we need more CS students, we need more this, we need more that, and universities respond in that manner. The same reason why a lot of Asian American, there's more Chinese classes now, because parents and industries have demanded it.
Yeah, and know that your first job out of grad school isn't important, but again, and we spoke to this in a couple different ways too. It's very unlikely that your first job with your first company is going to be your forever job. I mean, I've been through a couple firms myself. I mean, you guys, I'm sure, have worked in many different capacities, and sure, I'm sure you want to find something that you like and will be happy at, but if you don't, you move on. And I think a lot of people these days aren't afraid to do that. I think that's also a trait of millennials. They're not afraid to move on if something's not working, which is, again, why it's so important to listen to millennials and, figure out how to retain them by making sure they're valued and their voices are heard, because otherwise they're happy to move on.
You know what? I feel like right now the new generation doesn't care about the CEO anymore. I'm serious. I'm very serious. They don't care about CEO anymore. They care about Instagrams. You know what? Like fashion business. You know what? One of my neighbor, people following her for Instagram more than 1.5 million. She can open her fashion in her house, and everybody order from online from her, and she doesn't have to do nothing at all. Amazon.com. That one you're talking about today. That's it.
We have time for one more question,
right? So speaking of moving on, a lot of times, so I'm a millennial, and I work for a bank. And a lot of times what I notice when I work with a team is that the baby boomers are saying, oh, stop trying to move so fast. stop trying to absorb so much information, slow down. And so as a millennial, as we've talked about, you kind of want a sense of ownership and you want to move as fast as you can to make your career the best that it could possibly be. So how do you sort of deal with people saying that to you, but then also deal with the fact that maybe it's better to find an opportunity outside and go, explore your options? What do you do at that point? Is it better to just keep moving, or do you have to find ways as a millennial to find out how you can retain yourself and retain your generation?
I think with the power of the internet these days, and really the power to, there's I was just speaking with this guy, totally forgot his name, but there's a new book called The Side Hustle. So the opportunities and the amount of time that, just everybody wastes, but I see, I'm just going to be directed from a millennial perspective of the amount of shows that people are watching on Netflix and whatnot, and using that time and not to another endeavor that they can, because you have your 9 to 5, you work that, but if you find an opportunity that you're passionate about or find other avenues, there's so much opportunity for one individual, just as you mentioned, to sit there from their desk or from their couch and build a business. And because of that, you can retain your paycheck and keep going with the normal organization. But if you want to stand out and do something different, you don't have to take the type of risk that you originally had to, where you had to leave your job and you had to set up this LLC, a new company, and all this type of sort. Just do it from your couch at home in the other 5 hours that you have.
Yeah, be creative in ways both he said and also challenge the people, the boomers, the people who don't work your way. Like challenge them. Like, why can't I learn more, right? Like if he doesn't listen, go higher up. Go to your boss and try to learn from your boss instead of your boss, right? I mean, that's just my view on it.
I'm sure maybe there will have to be some political maneuvers.
Yeah.
If that were to be the case, maybe the person would not take that very kindly. But I think that
my boss is being lazy.
But I also think, when I listen to your question, I think, not clear from what you're describing whether, the person you're speaking about is simply really not hearing you, or maybe even, threatened by you a little bit. Someone's trying to move past me, or someone's trying to, move faster than I moved. So I think it could depend on the motivation, because if it's the latter, that person's it isn't a question of not understanding you. It's a question of wanting to keep you at a pace that he or she is comfortable with. And I think that's when you, from my perspective, really need to think that, is this person's going to be a barrier to you moving forward at the pace that you would like? Or do you think that, this is something that you can sit down, talk to them, and really change the perspective by getting to understand, what you're trying to do?
Or could it be that the boomer is actually giving you some sound advice too? Because sometimes you may not know it yourself that you might very well be moving faster than you should be, and maybe there should be something where you can sit and say, you know what, is there some relevance there from this person who's saying this to me? So it's not always the negative, but try to see if there's a positive to it.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah.
Millennials tend to think that we're always right, which we are. Which we are. No.
Well, thank you. I want to thank panel and Christina and Ed to taking this important leading role to kick off this series. I know it's very important to John and to AABDC from the formal employees' point of view. Well, my question is, I guess, follow up the last question. From the employer's perspective, why working with millennials, I find out they having more questions. They want to asking, when you're making decisions, you're asking why are you making these decisions, and what's your motivation, what's your expectations? So my question is, one side, I assume you want to be more flexible, more supportive to them, but another side, you want to making this whole decision making process be efficient. So how do you find the balance, to how much you want to give in, how much you want engaging them, to let them be involved in this process?
I'll go real quick. Is this on? I think part of it's just a question of leadership, and I think this is true among millennials, but among anyone that you work with. So people want to know why they're a part of your team. They want to be bought into a strategic vision. So I think it's not always answering every single micro question about why, why do I have to do this task? But the more you can consistently and effectively communicate the bigger, broader vision, the values that it entails, et cetera, I think the more you'll get people to buy into it and really take ownership, right, of what they're doing and how it contributes to a team. It doesn't feel good when you're a member of a team and you don't understand how what you're doing ladders up to the greater movement, right? So I think whether it's a millennial or not, it's really just about trying to paint that bigger picture to motivate people. And with that, thank you, everyone. That was a great discussion. Thank you to our panelists.